That was quick. What's going on? Peace, family. Welcome to another episode of We Charge Colonialism podcast and book club. I'm Ikemba Ojore, host of We Charge Colonialism.
Hey, peace. This is Frank, host for the Revolutionary Repatriation Educational Lecture Series every Sunday.
All right. And I think Natasha is going to be joining us this morning too. Might have to send her a reminder. I don't know, but yeah. Appreciate everybody for tapping in. Make sure if this is your first time here that you subscribe to the channel, subscribe to We Charge Colonialism, and follow us on all platforms. As well as if you're tuning in now or later, make sure that you like and you share so that we can get other people tapped into these discussions. And we usually do our podcast and book club Saturdays at this time, but you can always review the past episodes by subscribing to the channel and also, clicking on that button. Okay, Natasha is joining us in a second. So this is We Charge Colonial Podcast and Book Club. I don't like the way I just said that. We Charge Colonialism Podcast and Book Club. We're continuing to read Set the World on Fire by Keisha Blaine. Very powerful book too. Really, I think detailing the role that Black women played in the Black Nationalist movement. I think a topic that is undercovered, right? And not covered enough. And so I'm glad we're able to really delve into not just the women, just the movement in general and the role that Black women have played. And so we're going to continue this today. This will be the last time. So this is the last day that we're going to be covering this book. So we haven't decided on what we're going to be covering next, but stay tuned, stay tapped in to find out which book we'll cover next. But before we get into the book, we always like to start off by covering some current events with our weekly roundup. I'm not sure, Frank, did you have something that you wanted to cover?
No, I didn't really how they call it choose it. Okay, but I mean I can bring out something that just happened.
But you know what? I was wondering because I'm covering Sudan. And really, there's a lot going on that I think that we can really talk about for the first half and then get into the book,
Sure.
to be quite honest. So let me share my screen and get into the genocide and ethnic cleansing that's taking place over there. Again, appreciate everybody for tapping in. Make sure that you like and share. Let's see, yeah. And it's really it's unfortunate because I don't think that this story is being covered enough. This should be highlighted because particularly this is a place where there was a genocide that took place at the turn of the century, right? And many people characterize it as the first genocide of the 21st century. And here we are in 2023, and it's round two, that's taking place. So what have we learned? We haven't learned from Rwanda. We haven't learned from Congo. We haven't learned from all of the other places throughout Africa. And this, we haven't learned the lessons of the past to be able to prevent something like this from happening again. And I think this is sort of an indication, right? It's indicative of the feelings towards African people. The dehumanization that takes place when it comes to African lives, the world, acts like it doesn't matter. This is what African lives matter, right? Yeah, the Black Lives Matter movement, African lives matter, wherever we are. So let me get into this. This is corpses on the street. Sudan's RSF kills 1,300 in Darfur, monitors say. The mass killings might be the largest in the civil war that erupted in April, based on reports from monitors. You see that mass killings. What a mass killing? That's genocide. Uh, so let me get into this. This is by Matt Nashed. This story came out yesterday, November 10th, 2023. Sudan Rapid Support Forces, RSF, besieged a camp for displaced people of November 2nd after attacking a nearby army base in West Darfur. Over the next 3 days, the paramilitary group committed what may amount to the single largest mass killing since the civil war erupted in April. Local monitors told Al Jazeera that about 1,300 people were killed, 2,000 injured, and 310 remain missing. They went house to house to search for men and killed each one they found, said Montessa Saddam, who barely escaped the killing and arrived in Chad on Sunday. There were so many corpses in the streets. The latest atrocities are part of a wider campaign by the RSF and its allied militias to eradicate the non-Arab Masalik tribe from West Darfur, according to activists and survivors. Since the start of Sudan's civil war, the United Nations and Western governments have condemned the systematic killing and displacement of the Masalik from their land, but the criticism and concern have not deterred the RSF from carrying out more atrocities. A history of ethnic cleansing. This, one thing, I want to say is that this conflict has been going on since April. The indiscriminate killing of the non-Arab Africans have been going on since this conflict began. So when we talk, let me bring Natasha. When we're talking about the mass killings that's taking place, this could have been prevented, right? It's not as if the world leaders did not know about it. We could talk about the masses who, you have to be tapped into the media and keep up with these stories. Many of them are not aware of it because they may not be tapped in. The media isn't, putting the story out there for them to be conscious of what's taking place, right? So, I understand it, but the world leaders know what's going on. And there could have been things that prevented this because they knew that indiscriminate killing was going on. They knew that a genocide was coming, that ethnic cleansing was happening. And now here we are at the end of the year, where mass killings are taking place, right? And so now what is the world going to do? And I feel like there has been a lot of focus on what's taking place in Israel and Palestine. But you can't forsake what's taking place in Africa or anywhere where there's genocide taking place, for the sake of, somebody's really political, America, the West's political, geopolitical interests, which is over there, because that's what it amounts to when it comes to these colonizers. They don't really have a geopolitical interest here. But I'll stop there. I'm gonna continue with the story, but Natasha, Frank, if you wanted to say anything, and Natasha, you can introduce yourself as well. And peace, welcome.
Peace, everyone. I'm glad to be back. My name is Natasha. I'm a community organizer, member of the Northeast Political Prisoners Coalition. Peace, everyone. Happy New Day. I think, like, for me, in terms of just thinking about this particular story, what's coming up for me is the long history of like Arab conflict within the African continent, especially even going back into like the Arab slave trade. And so thinking about that and thinking about genocide over time, oppression over time, and having, coming into contact recently with, Sudanese people who have, fled, and who are some of them here. And so and also thinking about like whose interests, like when you're thinking about so many, I think I saw something on social media a couple of weeks ago or something, or when like the Israel Palestine thing really gained a lot of like media traction, and people didn't know that this was going on in the Sudan, and people were saying, you know, there's all of this happening in the Sudan and nobody's talking about it, and there's a call to, you know, make sure that, like you were saying, we know what's happening in Israel and Palestine, but how many people know about this? And also putting this also into, I think it's, you know, like historical context in terms of, you know, Africa and the war that's been going on in terms of you know, Africans within the continent, and, you know, that are Black Africans within the continent, and Arabs for like many generations and many years. And I think that's something that's also just in general not talked about in terms of what happens on the continent.
Go
Yeah,
ahead, Frank. You would.
yeah. Just to add on to that, you know, we have said this over and over and over and over and over, and you know, we keep saying it that we as Africans, you know, we as Black people, um, there's no one in the world that would ever speak or talk about what is happening to us. And the most interesting part of this whole issue is that we Africans are being used against ourselves, right? For example, we saw what happened in Libya. Who used the people that was used in Libya by NATO in America were the people they call the Arab Spring, right? They were the people that were used to go against Libya and Gaddafi, the Arab Spring. And these people they call the Arab Spring, most of them they are Africans. You see it? So the so-called West will use the Africans to go against Africans. All right? Even apart from the Arab Spring, even in West Africa, the so-called West uses the same Africans to go against Africans. All right? And you don't see the so-called West media bringing out the story of Africans who are dying, like what we saw recently, all right, with Gaza and Palestine. And that is not to say we are not in solidarity with those people. We are in solidarity with those people, right? But the issue here is when it comes to Black people, have we seen recently how the war have stood firm on every angle, on every platform, be it who or what, against Israel, that Israel have committed genocide in Gaza and Palestine? And in fact, have we seen, even in America here, people have stood against the decision of America supporting Israel and financing Israel and giving support to Israel. People have stood against it. But when it comes to Africa, where America herself have confessed of training terrorists, of training Africans, or training other people to overthrow African government, to infiltrate African government, America herself has said it. We have not seen the kind of attention that have been given to other people when it comes to Black people, of holding the American government responsible or questioning them, or even the West questioning them of their behavior in Africa. We have not seen it. And I don't blame people who today are on the side of Gaza and Israel, or Palestine. I don't blame them, right? I blame we, the Africans, and especially the Africans leaders, with all what is still going on. Have you seen African leaders talking about, you know what is going on in the war, or what is going on in Gaza, or what is going on in Palestine? It is the same thing that is going on in Africa, and it is performed by the same people that is supporting Israel to go against Gaza and Palestine. We have not seen African leaders to come out to unite and say, you know what? This is also in land of Africans, except South Africa. And I believe the reason why South Africa came out is because the experience or experiences of Africa have had with Asia when it comes to apartheid, and up to today, South Africa is still going through that economic apartheid in South Africa. And the reason why South Africa stood firm against Israel and also against America when it comes to the issue of Israel going against Palestine and Gaza is because the same United States supported, just as she's supporting Israel today, to kill Palestinians in Gaza, or they call it population or children, destroy them. It was the same way yesterday. The United States supported apartheid government, Israel, to slaughter and kill Africans or South Africans. So in light of that history, that's why you're seeing South Africa have stood firm against Israel and against the United States in this demand. But unlike the other African leaders, they are silent. And for example, look at William Ruto. Recently, he just invited the same people who orchestrated the killing and torturing of the Mau Mau people in Kenya. William Ruto have the guts. This man who came in, and we thought he was a savior for Africa, and we thought he was a Pan-Africanist for Africans, and we thought he was a Messiah. But not knowing, when these people just get into power, when they just get into power, they will preach the language and tongue of Africans. But the moment their access are in danger, and I know William Ruto have access in a white man's home, so they have threatened him. So now, because of his access, I believe he have turned around. This man invited the prince, or the so-called prince, or the so-called royal family in England, in this time of experiencing Western oppression, invited this man in Kenya, and this man came in Kenya for what? And William Ruto endorsed this man, talk every good thing about this man. When recently, when we have been speaking about the issue of the royal family in Kenya, when it relates to the Mau Mau society, what they did there, or the Mau Mau people, what they did in that place. And this man went there. He was well welcomed by William Ruto and his army. It was Julian Malema who put William Ruto on his toes and said, you did the wrong thing. Why should you invite such a man? But these are the kind of things we're talking about. When we are struggling and trying to identify the African stories, for our African leader to back up, they don't do it. They go and back up the oppressor and renew their strength in our midst. This is what making the African liberation very difficult, because the people that are at the forefront, they are not supporting the people who are at the back, bringing out the ill in society and pointing out the behavior of the oppressor. If only our leader were on our side, I can tell you, Africa would have been in a different position.
No, I unite with that. Definitely, it's a lot of contradictions for those who's just tapping in. We're covering what's taking place in Sudan and West Darfur with the genocide, ethnic cleansing that's happening in real time, right? And we look at the world leaders and what they're doing about it, or should I say, what they are not doing about it. But I think it just shows, if anything, this is a message to us. It's telling us as African people what we need to do. We can't be dependent and relying upon the colonizers to solve these problems anyway. So we have to form the African nation. The masses have to come together and build, I think, new institutions, right? That make these old institutions of government non-existent or just obsolete. I think it's important we begin to vision internationally, international institutions that incorporate all African people under one banner, because the nation state itself that we see today, the nation state, if you think about it, it's a colonial construction. It's a colonial enterprise. Like, you go wherever you go, the nation state that exists today came into existence through colonialism. Whether even the African nations, because those were colonial, they were colonies before they became independent, right? Or quote unquote independent. But I'm just read a little more. Well, let me just read this last section right here. A history of ethnic cleansing. For decades, Sudan's central government neglected non-Arab farmers and Arab pastoralists in Darfur, pushing them to compete for fertile land and dwindling water resources. From President Omar al-Bashir exacerbated um, these tensions by pitting tribes against each other as part of the divide and rule strategy. We know too well about this. In 2003, he armed Arab tribal militias and tasked them with crushing a mostly non-Arab rebellion, which started with protests against Darfur's economic and political marginalization. About 300,000 people died in combat, as well as from famine and disease brought on by the conflict. Rights groups and the UN accused these government-backed militias, known to victims as the Janjaweed, who are the RSF now, so that we're clear, are devils on horseback, of carrying out ethnic cleansing, right? So when we talk about the RSF that's fighting for political power, they're fighting the Sudanese government for political power. This is the same group that carried out the genocide then and is carrying out the ethnic cleansing and genocide that's happening now. They're one and the same. And so, these people need to be held accountable. But yeah, I'll open it up to you guys. Again, like, we're talking about this conflict in Sudan. I think we need to have more discussions around it, and the many other places that are suffering from colonialism, neocolonialism, because what's happening in Sudan also is a direct result of colonialism, right? And today, where you have forces, because when you get to the bottom of it, it's a struggle over resources and land that is taking place, and people are being displaced. And when you look at, you look at the people the Africans who have to migrate. Is that what they say? Migrate, but the ones that are being displaced, right, as a result of this conflict. Another thing that I think about is just like how the families, how these families who suffered from losses, like 10 years from now, 15 years from now, what is life going to be like for them? So this, it's creating, another cycle of poverty. The trauma that they have to deal with. This is going to impact generations. And even, like, though I'm based in the United States, and it's a bit different, but it's the same, because when you look at the Africans in the south of this country, what we had gone through as Africans in the South through the terrorism during Reconstruction and after Reconstruction, many of us had to migrate to the West and to the North, right? It's like we had to leave sort of like the country, that we were in, and migrate to other parts of the country or the land, because our lives were being terrorized 24/7, and because we couldn't make a living. So there's a lot of land that we had owned and controlled that has been taken away from us. There was ethnic cleansing that was taken. It was a genocide, ethnic cleansing that was taking place. But go ahead, y'all. I know it's a lot, man. I be wanting to just keep going, but spread the wealth. Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, let me just come. It's so sad, right? To the extent that sometimes it baffles me to really comprehend the how African people understand, and what need to be done on the African continent. Because the issue here is, right, the same thing we are fighting for. It was created by the same people we are going to for solution. It doesn't make sense. How can Africans come to the West to ask them for solution for African people? The same people who creating the problem, who are the people, okay, who have putting us in the place we are. Because if not because of them, we wouldn't be here talking about African liberation, talking about self-determination, talking about free Sudan, talking about free DRC Congo, talking about free Niger, talking about free Burkina Faso, talking about free Mali, because all those places that we have called a name, we are saying free, free because of them, because of their influence, because of their oppressive behavior. All right? When we're talking about the French army should leave, it is because of these things. So how can we come to the United States or to England and ask them about solution for Africa? It baffles me. Up to now, I can't get over it. I don't understand why. If the only people I believe we should go to are Africans. Call African people, call African leaders, call Africans or authority, call African organization and ask them for solution and ask them for support. Because the more you go to the oppressor for support and the oppressor give you support, they are limiting your chance of freedom. Because they will dictate to you how freedom is supposed to be like, how freedom is supposed to look like. And freedom to the oppressor for us is not freedom. It's more oppression. It's more oppressive. So how can we go to them? The same people we are fighting against, we go to them for support. We go to them for direction, asking them how peace supposed to look like. It baffles me.
And I think just building off of what Frank said in terms of going to the same people, like, the oppressor. And I think this is a quote that by Kwame Ture that I had seen from Akimba a couple, like 2 weeks ago, this idea of the oppressor, Kwame Ture saying that, you can't go to the oppressor to give you freedom from themselves. Like, that's never going to happen. And so, and thinking also about when we're thinking about sovereignty and self-determination and ideas around what does it look like for African people to resolve their own conflicts. And I think this goes back to like just also the legacy of colonialism and neocolonialism in the present time in terms of the destabilization of people's cultures, but also the destabilization of people's communities. So when we think about even the ways in which you would handle conflict, or like African people have their ways of handling conflict, you would use those as opposed to saying, oh, okay, well, we're going to use people from outside, groups that are actually groups that are actually, yeah, we cannot have oppressors telling the oppressed how to rid themselves of the oppressor. And so these proxy wars and these genocides that are all connected to colonialism and neo-colonialism, where, like Frank was saying, constantly looking to the West to say, okay, this is how we should handle it, not knowing, I think a lot of the times, this legacy of colonialism that has brought us to this place where we think that we should just be listening to whatever the West says because they're the ones who know how to handle conflict. Whereas if you see the track record of the West, they have, they engage in so much conflict over time and in many different regions, and engage in so many proxy wars. And for me, I feel like it's a lot of lack of real history imparted on the people, and for them to be able to really say, you know what, we want to handle ourselves, we want to handle our stuff ourselves. Even when it comes to conflicts, we want to use African ways of handling conflict and dealing with issues. And like Akimba was bringing up, especially issues that stem from false borders and colonialism and the legacy of colonialism and current neocolonialism. So I think that there are some countries that, or not even, I mean, countries, not necessarily, but groups within different countries in Africa that, are thinking about how to start dealing with African people's problems on African people's terms. And I think, like you were saying, Frank, it's up to us as African people to put the word out, but also to start to put the word out too about, like you were saying, no longer looking to the West for what we consider conflict resolution.
Yeah, serious contradiction. Because at the end of the day, the oppressor wants to maintain the status quo, wants to maintain the system that they have developed and built for themselves, which is rooted in oppression and exploitation, particularly of African people. And so, to even want to work with the oppressor to be a part of that system is a contradiction in itself. We need to be developing systems of our own, and people need to be looking at us as we need to be creating examples for the rest of the world. So with that being said, though, we want to transition to the book. Again, appreciate everybody for tapping in. First time, if this is your first time being on our channel, We Charge Colonialism, subscribe. It's nothing to subscribe. I think it's free to subscribe. I know the capitalists, they always looking for a way to make money, but I think now it's still free. So get it while it's hot. And like and share. Make sure you like and share as well, so we can get other people to tap in. So we get in. And today's topic is Pan-Africanism and anti-colonial politics. This is chapter 5 for those who want to follow along. And I was about to say, this is the last day we're going to be covering this book as well. So we'll be transitioning to a new book. We haven't decided on the book. We can do that, I guess, next day or two. But we're going to be bringing you guys another book. And I hope you guys are reading in between these sessions, because that is like the objective too, for having these book readings. We can't do it all in these sessions, but it's to sort of motivate you to read the book outside of these meetings and come back and even tell us what you have learned from your reading. So with that being said, getting into chapter 5, Pan-Africanism and anti-colonial politics. I just lost the page. What just happened? All right. Writing in 1944 to A. Balfour Linton, editor of the African newspaper, the Pan-Africanist leader, Amy Jacques Garvey, laid out a strategic plan for securing the political, social, and economic freedom of Black men and women across the globe. The redemption of Africa, she insisted, is a solution for the ills of all Africans, those at home and those abroad, and all people of African descent the world over. The nerve center is Africa, she continued, and unless and until this spinal column is put into working order, the limbs cannot function properly. For it is the nerve center, Africa, that we must get our motivating power. Strengthen that, and you automatically strengthen even the far-flung fingers and toes, she added. Jacques Garvey's statement, which came during a global economic political crisis of World War II, reflected her unwavering commitment to colonialism and Pan-Africanism, the political belief that African peoples on the continent and in the diaspora share common past and destiny. As colonial rule spread throughout Africa, Jacques Garvey emerged as part of a vanguard of Black nationalist women leaders at the forefront of Black liberatory movements. In the 1940s, she launched the international Pan-Africanist movement from her base in Jamaica, aimed at challenging global white supremacy and securing universal Black liberation. As Jacques Garvey fought to eradicate the global color line from her base in Jamaica, a vast diasporic community of Black women from all walks of life, many of them involved in Black nationalist organizations, were also engaged in anti-colonial and Pan-Africanist politics. Amid the socio-political upheavals of World War II, Amy Belly, Ethel M. Collins, Amy Ashwood, Garvey, Una Marson, and many other Black women activists and intellectuals of the period challenged global white supremacy through various mediums, including journalism, media, and overseas travel, recognizing that the challenges facing people of African descent in the United States or any other nation state were deeply intertwined with the experience of Black people throughout the diaspora. These Black nationalist women promoted a global Black liberationist vision and added distinctive voices to discourses surrounding Pan-Africanism. Through an array of writings and speeches during the 1940s, they exercised their political agency, affirmed their humanity, and demanded equal recognition and participation in global civil society. I want to stop there. I don't want to get too far removed, too, from Sister Amy's this quote right here. I thought was really powerful because I unite with her. I agree. And this was the teachings of Garvey, right? As far as Africa, really, if you free Africa, you liberate Africa and have a strong Africa, then you'll be able to liberate the Africans around the world, to have a strong Africa that is supporting Africans wherever they are and prepared to go to war if there was any attack on Africans outside of the continent. So as she said here, the nerve center is Africa. Until the spinal column is put into working order, the limbs cannot function properly. For it is the nerve center, Africa, that we must get our motivating power. And we can see today, like the struggles that African people have outside of the continent. And I think that is directly connected to, Africa's problems today. Did y'all want to add anything to that before I move on? I just wanted to make sure I highlight that again.
Yeah, just to add to that, right? It is the reality. And for the most part, right? I would say this. It's just one nation in Africa, for the most part, for now, which is Niger, that have stood firm against Western exploitation just in one area of natural gas. And having seen how they have made Europe and the West, it exposed them. So having seen just one nation, Niger, who just disagreed just for one resources, natural gas to be exported or transported to Europe or to the West, just one. Niger hold on to it. Have you seen how Europe have turned or the West have turned almost to be a third world country? Just that alone, if African people can hold on to their resources, if African people can just unite, and the thing, it is the reality. We have seen it. The entire war right now, their focus is on Africa. Everybody know that whosoever distance herself from Africa, your day of doom is close. Everybody know. They all know. And that's why they are fighting to have peace of Africa, to come in contact of Africa. And let me say this, maybe a lot of people don't know. Because of what the worst, and I'm going to be a little bit revolutionary on this, because of what the worst, the oppressor have done. Pay attention. Everywhere they have gone, people have gone against them. All right? People have gone against them. The entire war, because of what the United States have perpetrated, because of the United States foreign policy, let's put it that way, because of a foreign policy in other countries, that is why she's finding it difficult in this contemporary Africa, in this contemporary global so-called village. That is why a lot of nations are distancing herself or themselves away from the U.S. because of the U.S. foreign policy in those countries. That is why nobody wants to associate herself with the West, with the colonizer, because of what they have done. It's experience. What they have experienced from the oppressor, nobody wants to ally with the oppressor. And that is why you see nations are drifting away. And as nations drift away, so it exposes the oppressor. Have you seen what is happening recently with Asia, Gaza, and Palestine, with the support of the U.S. for Asia? Have you seen even within the U.S.? I can say this has been the very first time for people, the majority of U.S. citizens, to distance themselves away from their government. But they have always been on the side of their government. But this is the very first time for majority of people in the U.S. to say, no, we cannot support Israel. To say, no, they are costing their government. And this alone, it exposes the oppressor. It exposes the colonizer. Just this alone. Now, talk about nations who have experienced the oppressor foreign policy. They are not going to be on the side of the oppressor. And this was a tactic maybe the U.S. thought she was going to use to get back, because she did it with Ukraine. It shows how weak the U.S. is. All right? So she tried to use the support of Israel. It did not work, because you know what? It's not going to work. And I will say this: Israel will fall if Israel continue what she's doing. And behind closed door of what I have seen, based on things I have done or research I have done, the United States have seen that it will be the downfall of Israel. So what the United States is doing now, the United States is now backing off. If you can see, recently Blinken was in Turkey, okay, talking with the Turkey president or prime minister. I don't know if I can pronounce his name good, in Dinga. Why would they want to do that? Because they have seen that the Arab nation are collaborating to go against Asia, and the United States will not make it to fight the entire Arab nation. So they are falling back. So now their language, now they are saying, if you really listen to the media now, they are now saying the prime minister of Asia is not listening to Biden. And even though the United States have a good relationship with Asia, but the prime minister is not listening to Biden. The prime minister does not want peace. They are the ones saying that now. So pay attention to what is going on around the world. So again, it has backfired the United States weakness, because she thought she could use this to gain back her potential, her powerness. It's not working. So again, this is to tell African leaders just how World War II brought weakness to the West, and it helped us to gain some kind of a shame independence. This is the time for African leaders to get together swiftly. It's about Africa. It's about African people. It's about Black people. Nowhere in the world, everyone are supporting themselves and rallying up, except African people. We are acting like the Messiah. At the time of acting like a Messiah, that time have passed. We can only be Messiah for ourselves, because everyone are acting like a Messiah for themselves.
No, definitely. Did you want to add anything, Natasha?
No, I think I'll leave it there with what Frank said.
Yeah, he's definitely on point, man. Like, I think Israel, what we see there, is an example. Though I think like it's been happening for a while, imperialism and crisis, but it's all about what we do because this isn't the first time that imperialism has been in crisis. But they always, when it looks like we have them on their heels, and we're about to overturn this relationship, the imperialists fight back tooth and nails and come up with different strategies and find um African or leaders within the oppressed group to betray the African revolution. I just thought of that from Dr. John Henry Clark as far as betrayal, right? Because he has the book, Who Betrayed, what is it attached to the Worldwide African Revolution?
The Worldwide Revolution, I believe. That's the African World Revolution, I think it's called.
Yeah.
The African World Revolution.
So we have to learn from those errors and make sure it doesn't happen again. Let me try to get a little bit more of this in. So while these women embraced Pan-Africanism, were deeply committed to anti-colonial politics, they often embraced imperialist and civilizationist views that paradoxically promoted some of the same ideas they rejected. Likewise, even as they advocated women's rights, many of these women also endorsed a repressive and patriarchal vision of Black liberation, one in which men occupy positions of power and authority while relegating women to secondary subordinate positions. Through their many writings and speeches, which circulated throughout the United States and other parts of the globe, women played a key role in keeping nationalist ideas alive in Black public discourse decades after the Universal Negro Improvement Association effectively lost its stronghold. Foregrounding Black nationalist women's writings during World War II not only captures the complexities, tensions, and contradictions within nationalist women political ideas and practices, but also illustrates how these women shaped and were shaped by Black internationalist movements and discourses of the period. Let's stop there. I think that's an important thing to like really examine as far as the one of the things that we want to make sure that we overturn, right? Contradictions as far as adopting certain views of our movement of the world that has, I think, imperialist or white-centered undertones to it, or just influenced by the imperialist ideas or colonialist ideas when it comes to interacting with other Africans, because there has been a history of that, and with ourselves, whether we're talking about Black men, Black women relations, or relations between Africans on the continent and in America, or in the Caribbean and so forth. Because when you look at the history, particularly here in America, and also in the West Indies, the views of Africa and Europe too, but the Africans adopted views of Africans that were similar to the views of Europeans as far as being backwards, the dark continent, having to bring civilization to Africa. Like, what civilization are you bringing to Africa? Like, what, the European civilization? Those ideas, those views. And so, and I think this is what is being highlighted in this paragraph, because we can adopt revolutionary, we could be anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, but are we looking to replicate the colonial structures, though, in this colonial framework? And Frantz Fanon talked about this, right, in Wretched of the Earth. The last chapter, he taught, shit, we're going to build another Europe, like, we don't have to do, they did that perfectly, you know what I'm saying? So we don't have to recreate the will, because that already exists. But I think we have to center our experiences as African people and build something that's conducive to the lives of Africans around the world. But I just wanted to make sure we touched on that. Did y'all want to add anything?
I think this goes back to a lot of what we were, I guess what we've been talking about, but also what we've been talking about for like generations in terms of African people reclaiming African culture. And I think that's that's the way to avoid these, like you were saying, these contradictions in terms of us picking up and holding on to Eurocentric ways of seeing the world and understanding the world, is through us seeing that our path goes back to reclaiming and restoring and practicing our African ways of being and existing in the world, and just taking up that type of cultural way of knowing things, but also just like understanding that that's like a real process that we have to go through, it's not enough to just fight for the liberation, like you were saying, how Frantz Fanon talked about, like, okay, you're going to be free, but as who? As Africans, or as, Africans who are Europeans? As what are you going to be free as? And so thinking about how in tandem with fighting for liberation, we have to also be working toward, re-Africanization, reclaiming of our African culture, and letting go of European ways and European ideas and practices, because if we don't let them go, we will recreate the same things, because nobody's acultural. And so if you're not practicing your culture, you're practicing somebody else's culture. And European culture has been made to be seen as something that is natural and universal. I mean, when I see things, sorry, give me a second.
Yeah, one thing I appreciate too in reading this is the seeing the movements, the ideas, the organizing that was taking place, right? And us being a part of that tradition, and getting the understanding of, we're not like creating, as far as like the ideas, anti-colonial ideas and what needs to be done, like, we're not creating anything new. We may have to develop new strategies and so forth, but there has been a framework that has been given to us, and it's a framework that the colonizers don't want us to be familiar with. They don't want it. Like, we're not going to learn this in the colonial schools. We're not going to learn about Amy Garvey, both of the Amy Garveys, or Marcus Garvey, or the ideas that they had, the ideas of Malcolm X. We're not going to learn about the ideas of Martin Delany and so forth. There's going to be a certain narrative and a certain movement that is going to be emphasized more, right? The integrationist movement will be emphasized more, but the nationalist movement, the revolutionary movement, will not be talked about, and some of the leaders might be brought up because you can't ignore them because of the impact that they had, but you won't really learn about the movement and how we're like that's part of our lineage. Like, we're descendants of these people and these ideas. But yeah, go ahead, Natalia. You wanted to finish?
Yeah. What I was saying is that in terms of culture and re-Africanization and going back and practicing our culture, when we think about the things that we see today, in terms of when we look across the world and this idea of European practices and ways of being in life, are seen as just something that's normal and universal, and everybody aims to do those things, and not realizing that whatever you create is you created based on your worldview and your cultural framing. And so I think we don't pay enough attention to the things that we see. Like, let's say, for example, in particular in Africa, when we see things that are just mirrors of what the West is creating, and those things being taken up and creating something. So let's say, for example, like the West has Fashion Week everywhere, and Paris and Italy and the US and New York. And then we want to create the same thing in Africa. The West has Hollywood. So we want to create the same thing in Africa. People want to create the same thing in India. In Asia, you have, the industries that are industrialization, and wanting to industrialize in the manner that follows the process of the West. And so a lot of these things that we see when we think about things that just seem to be like, oh, those are just the natural processes, or these are just things people create. No, those are things that are created specifically out of a European mind and way of being. Because even when we think about like the fashion industry, or we think about industrialization, or we think about, I forgot the other example that I gave, but when we think about, oh yeah, Hollywood, when we think about these things were never one made as cultural pieces for African people. They were always made for, Europeans, and by Europeans through their own mind of saying, you know what, we're going to create this in our image, because and it all connects back to capitalism and colonialism, right? These are the same people who are creating these systems that allow capitalism and exploitation to continue to flourish, and not even caring whether or not what happens to the world or the land when it comes to creating a lot of these things, right? Just continuous creation of things that are not beneficial to African people when we think about it, whether or not we can look at Hollywood today, or we can look at, fashion and look at Black people in these areas. It doesn't matter, because ultimately we don't see the price of all of this stuff as people who do live in the West. But when we think about, Africa, and we think about other countries that are not, what they consider to be like, the more powerful countries, the cost of all of this is in those places. It's in, countries in Africa. That's where the cost is, but we don't see it as much. And so when you're African and you're picking up and you're, creating these institutions, or you're creating these ways of life as if, oh yeah, that's just something that everybody does, so let's do it too, as opposed to saying, no, we're going to create institutions, or we're going to create things that are going to benefit us, that are going to lead us more toward our practicing our own culture, and also practicing ways that are going to lead us to liberation. And so I think even things that we don't realize are not culturally aligned with us and that are not really going to benefit us are seen as something just objective or universal that everyone should be doing. And we don't realize, the insidiousness of European culture being seen as something that's benign and just universal, something that just exists. Oh, these are just things that we all should be doing. And so I think really reflecting on those things in terms of not just fighting for liberation, but fighting for and working toward re-Africanization and practicing your own African culture at the same time is really important.
Nah, I unite. Well said. Frank, did you want to add on? I'm going to give you the last word.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, just in addition to that, whenever I hear people saying Western people brought civilization of Africa, the only thing I tell them is the civilization of exploitation. Because before Western civilization, we enjoy our own civilization. We never went out of hunger. Exploitation was not as the way it is, because everything produced were all distributed by the community, by the village, by the kingdom, and everyone partake communally, like everyone has fair share of whatsoever that was being produced, or even getting from the soil. So the community partake and have a shareholder, and the community met and they discussed on issue pertaining to the state, the kingdom, the nation, the tribe, and that will benefit everybody. But unlike Western civilization, when they came, it deprives people from speaking out. Because if you speak now, even up to today, if you speak about the illness in society, they block your video, they take your video down. If you speak against the oppressor, they take a video out, they come against you and they said this go against our guideline, all of those things. So if you expose uh, uh, if you expose what is happening in the world, they come against you and say this is not in guideline of our policy and all of those things. So all those are part of Western civilization, Western culture that oppresses people, that you cannot speak, that oppresses people. I mean, we own our land in Africa, for instance, but since Western civilization, we don't own land in Africa. The Western own the mine, the dam, all those places in Africa. When we speak of taking our land back, our resources back, they come against us for what happened in Niger, and Mali, Togo, Burkina Faso, or let's say DRC Congo, all those places. So Western civilization came and destroyed our civilization, and their civilization is corrupt. All right. And for example, before I even leave, let me just end with this. Recently, I listened to the counselor of the Israeli in the United States here. She said one thing, and people are not paying attention. And I'm going to talk about it tomorrow. And Vicky did talk about it, but I'm going to expand on it tomorrow. What did she say? She said the main problem of Israel are the Black African in America. The main problem of Asia. What is Black African in America doing to Asia? Are they fighting Asia? Are they killing Israeli? What are they doing? That's what she said. The main problem of Asia are the Black Africans in the U.S. Those were her exact word. The main problems of Asia are the Black Africans. Now, pay attention. What are the Black Africans in America doing? They are waking up. They are claiming, all right? They are saying they are the Jew. They are the true, how they call it, Israelite. They are the 12 tribes. So they are exposing Israel. If you really pay attention, that's what she meant. If you really pay attention, because Africans, people in the U.S. are not fighting Asia. They are not in conflict with Asia. They are not bombing Asia. They are not bombarding Asia. But they are going around preaching. And to the extent, if you pay attention to them, no pastors or deacons or whosoever ever challenge them. I have followed them because I'm a Pan-Africanist. I'm a revolutionary. So I listened to all both sides. So when she said that, I decided to do research to see. And what those, I mean, that's what exactly she was talking about. And, but we'll go into it deep maybe tomorrow because we're out of time. We can't hear you, Nkrumah. We can't hear you. You are muted.
You're on mute. There you go.
All right, I'm back. Now, appreciate everybody for tapping in. I was actually trying to cue something up. We had a request. For Nkrumah for the next book, which I don't have a problem with, but we're gonna build and see what we're gonna read next. Because Nkrumah, Malcolm X himself said that we should study the Pan-Africanism of Nkrumah. And that's what I was looking for. I was like, let me see if I can find this real quick and end it with that. But I'll have it next time. So appreciate everybody for tapping in again. Like and share. And if this is your first time being here, subscribe. We'll be back, hopefully next Saturday. And so, make sure that you check out what we got going on throughout the week as well. Frank, you'll be here tomorrow, right? At 1, U.S. and EU. Once again, reminds Africa of how evil they are. You want to say anything about that?
Yeah, tomorrow we'll be going into that, into that. I'll be I already have some of the information already in my email, so I will be putting them together tonight. Make sure tomorrow you tune in as we fire as always, as usual. You know how it is.
Sure. All right, y'all. Appreciate everybody again, man. Make sure you have a revolutionary day. Do something. Get organized. Get organized. The struggle continues. Peace.